Hello, foreign exchange students, travelers, people who move to a new country, and everybody else. This video is about culture shock and 10 ways that I coped with it that may be able to help you. So, before we get into anything, what is culture shock? Well, I looked it up on Google and I wrote it down, and here's what it says. The feeling of disorientation experienced by someone who is suddenly subjected, which I don't think is the right word, to an unfamiliar culture, way of life, or set of attitudes. Now that's a little scientific, but everybody has their own experience with culture shock. Everybody has their own feelings with it. Everybody experiences it in a different way. Well, how does culture shock work? Culture shock comes in 4 phases: the honeymoon phase, the frustration phase, the adjustment phase, and the acceptance phase. I have just reached the acceptance phase, and it took me 5 years. Guys, 5 years. That is not an easy phase to go through. Well, I did some research on culture shock because it is something that I experienced, and whenever I experience something, I want to learn as much as I can about it. So I will link my sources in the description box down below, but what I learned is that these 4 phases are very distinct. When I researched this, I realized that I experienced these 4 phases very distinctly. They were very, very obvious now that I look back. And I had to go through all of these, and they were so hard, except for the honeymoon phase and the acceptance phase. Those are easy. The frustration phase and the adjustment phase are so hard to deal with, but everybody deals with them in their own way. These are just the 10 ways I've dealt with them. So here we go. Respect the culture of the country you are moving to. Now, this doesn't mean that you necessarily have to agree with it. It just means that you have to respect it. When I first moved here, there were so many things about the Inland Northwest that I found weird. I was confused about everybody dressing like they were about to go to the gym, people going to school in their pajamas. It was so weird. Where I'm from, if you don't dress fashionably to go to the grocery store, you're a weirdo. But you know, considering that my dad was already from the Pacific Northwest and I grew up with him, it wasn't too hard for me to understand that there were gonna be differences, but even he noticed some weird things after living in Italy for 12 years. He lived in the Inland Northwest in the 80s, where there were mullets everywhere. There's still mullets everywhere. Integrate something from your own culture in your everyday life. For me, it's the food. I integrate some Italian food in my everyday life. I speak Italian to my son every day. I parent him in the way an Italian parent would parent their child. For some people, it may be some religious artifact that may be important to your culture. For other people, it may be something else. For some people, it may be the food, like it is for me. And I also have pictures of my family around my house that still live in Italy, some who passed away. So all of these things bring me a lot of comfort. Don't be afraid to seek therapy. Unfortunately, sometimes culture shock can come with some very distinct problems that will happen to you. For me, and I'm not ashamed of it, I ended up dealing with a pretty bad depression. I am still coping with it. I still go to therapy, and it made my life so much easier to just go to therapy. Luckily, I can afford it. I have insurance, but if you don't, then maybe the cost of therapy may only add to the stress. So if things are a little hard for you right now and you can't afford a therapy, don't be afraid to talk to a friend. If you have family in the new country you live in, talk to them. Don't be afraid to even just talk about it to yourself. I mean, sometimes I would do that. I would just sit on the couch and I would start talking to myself about the weirdest things about this culture and why are they like this? Why are people wearing leggings when they go to the grocery store? Why can't they just put on a pair of jeans? Guess what? Now I wear leggings to the grocery store. Sometimes I wear pajamas. It's comfortable and nobody cares. If there is a community of people that are from your culture within the new country or within the new town you live in, seek them out. It is really helpful to talk to somebody who may have gone through the exact same thing you did. Unfortunately, where I live, there's no Italian communities. There's an Italian grocery store. I've never gone to it. I'm planning to, but there's no actual Italian community here. I know there used to be a pretty big Italian community here, but then they all moved to Seattle, Portland, Los Angeles. So it's basically just me and like maybe a few other people that I've never met. So basically it's pretty lonely here, but I've learned ways to cope with that too. Communicate with your family as much as possible, whether it be Skype, FaceTime, WhatsApp. I use WhatsApp. It really helps. I talk to my mom maybe 2 to 3 times a week. I talk to my grandmother once every 2 weeks. It really helps with the loneliness when I can't talk to somebody in my own language. The only person I talk Italian to right now is my 1-year-old son, and all he can say is banana right now because that's his favorite food. So for now, talking to my family on a weekly basis at least is really helping me. If you can't talk to your family on a weekly basis, maybe a monthly basis. Things like this would really help you to find distractions, whether it be a new hobby, make new friends. If you live in the Northwest like me, maybe take up hiking, because hiking is a big thing here. Maybe learn to cook the cuisine of the area. Just find a way to distract yourself and also find a way to appreciate the culture through these distractions. Don't be afraid to immerse yourself into the culture. Don't be afraid to be a part of it. Don't be afraid to go out and try the street food. Don't be afraid to go to festivals. Don't be afraid of it. It can be a lot of fun and you can meet some really cool people. For example, here we have a yearly food festival of just the worst American junk food you can think of, but it is so good. But it's only once a year, so why the hell not? And this one is kind of sucky, but understand that not everything will go according to plan. When I first moved here, I thought I was going to make so many friends. I thought I was going to do so well in school that I would just move back to Italy, go to university. I probably made like 3 or 4 friends, and I don't keep in touch with a lot of them anymore. When I first moved here, I didn't realize that the diet here would actually make me feel sick for the first few months. So I thought I was gonna be fine. Turned out, for the next 3 or 4 months, I was gonna be bent over a toilet because the food here was just so heavy. It was so weird. My body couldn't handle it like it could handle the Mediterranean diet. I moved from the Mediterranean diet, a strict Mediterranean diet, home-cooked food every day with lots of olive oil and delicious pizza, to a country where all the salads would even make me sick. But you know, that was me. I know a lot of people who move to the US don't experience this problem. I did. I don't know why it happened, but I'm a lot better now, so that's a plus. Number 9 is to not be afraid to talk about this with your friends and family. They may not understand it, they may not know what's going on, maybe they do understand it. My mom went through the same experience I did. She grew up in Italy, she married an American, she moved to the US, she experienced really bad culture shock, but she found a way to get over it. I know that she's happy that she experienced moving to New York. Of course, in New York, there's a big Italian community, huge Italian community. It's mostly an Italian community. So for her, in some ways, it was a little easier, while for me, it was a little easier in other ways, considering that I grew up with an American father. This is so important. Stay away from unsupportive people. If you're talking about it and somebody says,
"You need to get over it."
No, you can't just get over culture shock.
Why do you hate our culture so much?
I don't hate your culture. I'm just confused.
Maybe you should go back to the country you came from.
What kind of statement is that? You shouldn't tell people that. Some people really experience it. If I moved from Washington State to Texas, I would be pretty confused too. They're 2 very different states, both very different in culture, both very different ways of living. These things happen. You need to stay away from unsupportive people. These people are going to ruin everything. They're going to make things worse. They're going to make you feel even more depressed than you already were. Just stay away from them. If they start saying those rude comments like, "Why do you hate our culture? Why don't you just get over it? Maybe you should go back to your own country." No, you don't have to. You don't have to listen to them. They're not right. They are absolutely wrong in these sense. They're not exactly the people that you should be around with anyways. Doesn't matter what you're experiencing. I live next to Idaho. If I went from Washington State to Idaho, I'd still be pretty confused. They're both right next to each other, and yet they are so different. Cultures are everywhere. Even within one country, there are different cultures. It's okay to experience culture shock. There's nothing to be ashamed of. All you gotta do is find a way to cope with it to make your life a lot easier. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you learned a little bit from it. If you've never experienced culture shock, just understand that it's not the person's fault. These things happen, and the best thing you can do is just be supportive, listen, talk to them, make them feel at home, and if you are experiencing it, do not worry. It is normal, it is natural, it's just part of being a human, and eventually you will accept it. It may take a long time. I would know, it took me 5 years, but you can do this and things will get better. Trust me, it gets so much better. If you ever experienced culture shock, please let me know. My name is Sarah and I'll see you soon.